Clerk, can I ask you the timing, please?
Sorry, the time is 12:04 and we're awaiting the arrival of the chair. She's on her way.
Yeah, the first timing I had, thank you, but I appreciate the answer. Clerk, is the vice chair able to start the meeting?
Your worship, the chair has arrived.
Thank you.
Mr. Wills, you may want to take the video off.
I'll call the 17th meeting of the Corporate Service Committee to order. It's a virtual meeting during COVID emergency, and City Hall is open with reduced capacity and physical distancing requirements. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming or on YouTube or on the city website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon requests. And to make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca, or you can call us at 519-661-2489 extension 2425. And to make a request for this specific meeting, the corporate service meeting, you can contact us at csc@london.ca. I'll look for disclosures of pecuniary interest from committee. Seeing none, we don't have a consent. Oh, we have a consent agenda, sorry. I'll look to committee to see if they want to pull anything out of the consent items. Okay, so I'll need a mover and a seconder, and then we'll go to comments. Moved by Mayor Holder, seconded by Councillor Morgan. Comments or questions from committee? I'll go to Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about 2.5. I'm wondering why the HDC said the potential for this was limited, since we're looking at building affordable housing in many places. Is there someone able to respond to that question?
I'll go to Mr. or Mrs. Barbone?
Through the chair, Mr. Warner will be able to answer
Okay,
the question.
thank you, Mr. Warner.
Hi, and through the chair. Yes, so HDC was provided an opportunity to review this site. There's going to be significant constraints with respect to grading, as well as costs associated with the private permanent stormwater system and further studies. So the feasibility for that group or that team wasn't there to support it. So we do have interest from both adjoining owners in lieu of that.
Councilor Van Hulst, any other questions?
No, that was a fine answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments or questions for the items? Councilor Helmer.
On item 2.2, there's a reference in the report about the cost of insurance increasing, and it's attributed to a hardening insurance market. And I wonder through the chair if Mr. Wills would like to speak to what he's seeing out there in terms of the cost of insurance. It's something I have been seeing at many boards and commissions and organizations that I'm involved in, is increasing costs of insurance over the last year or so.
Through the chair. Yeah. So if you're paying attention to the insurance world at all, you will see that last year and this year, the market is tightening up and many people are experiencing increased premiums. This is due to a number of factors. The most obvious factor is a reinsurance market, a global reinsurance market is making a correction on catastrophic losses due to extreme weather. There's been lots of bad events in the recent past, forest fires, floods, hurricanes, and other things that have caused significant damage worldwide and shortages in the reinsurance capacity. So that's the first thing that is coming into play. And then there's obviously new pressures that are being applied right now that are still being realized from the pandemic. There's a business interruption, insurance risk, and there's cyber risk, and there's errors and omissions for big decisions that are being made. And all of these things are going to play a factor in future premiums and writing of policies, as well as a reduced opportunity for investment income on the premiums because there's going to be low interest rates for some time going forward. And with these things happening, plus the odd shock loss here or there, I don't know of anybody, municipality or other sector that is talking favorably in regards to their insurance renewals. The increases are going to be pretty hard and pretty real for a while. My report showed you what I expect will be the renewal, and compared to what I've seen out there, I find it's relatively reasonable, even though it is going to be an increase.
Any other comments or
Thank you.
questions? I'll ask again if there are any other comments or questions for the consent agenda items. It's been moved and seconded, and we'll call to question. So we should be all logged in and able to vote online? If you're not logged in, please raise your, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'm having difficulties for some reason this morning to get into eScribe, so I vote yes.
Thank you. Mayor Holder? You're muted, Mayor Holder. Can you?
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Thank you. I don't have the thoughtful reasons of Councillor Hopkins. I just haven't logged in, and I will and vote yes.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't voted?
I need to vote yes too. I totally forgot to log in, so that's on me as well.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
So we have no scheduled items. We'll go to our items for direction, and this is a request for delegation status from Mrs. Jacqueline Madden and Michael Dawthorne, and they're in committee room number 5. I'll need a mover, Councillor Hammer, seconded by Councillor Hopkins, and we'll call to question. And we're going to be hearing it now.
I vote yes, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Hopkins?
I vote yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
So we'll go to committee room number 5. If Mrs. Madden could just come to the microphone and thank you.
Do I turn it on? It's on.
Oh, it's on.
And you want to come this way a bit and I'll get my phone right here. Perfect.
Okay, you ready? Okay, thank you everyone for allowing us to speak today. Michael and I have both been longstanding members of the city's Accessibility Advisory Committee. We have both recently resigned, and we wanted you to be aware of the issues we had faced, which led to our resignations. As you may know, ACAC is a provincially mandated committee for every municipality with more than 10,000 residents. Representation is critical at every level of government, but due to the nature of disabilities, representation is more difficult to achieve because of the complex nature of physical, developmental, emotional, and mental health issues in this population. As a result, ACACs were mandated so that people with disabilities could have a voice in their local governments. As you may also be aware, the rights of people with disabilities has been an afterthought at all levels of government since the beginning of time. Our municipal governments have the greatest ability to impact the daily lives of people with disabilities. Having an accessible city is a benefit to everyone who lives there, not just the 15% who live with disabilities. It should be the easiest for community members to access and should be able to have the greatest impact on individual lives. The City of London has had an active ACAC for years. We have worked with city staff and council to be leaders in accessibility. Our FADS document has been copied throughout the country and the world. We regularly review site plans, work with the city's accessibility specialists to develop the city's accessibility plan. We undertake community outreach. We review the city budget with an accessibility lens. We work with many staff departments to make recreation, trails, and community gardens more accessible, and I could go on. We have developed many positive working relationships, and I do believe we have made our city better for those with disabilities. Over the past 5 years, the city has been conducting a review of their advisory committees. Unfortunately, recently this has led to lots of negative discussion about the role of advisory committees at council and in the media. But to be clear, the Accessibility Advisory Committee cannot even be in the discussion of which committees we need to have or not have. It is mandated by the provincial government, and it is a committee you must have. Although we welcome the discussion and review as to how our committee can better communicate and work with staff and council, there is not discussion to be had about its existence. So there was already negativity circulating about committees, and then COVID hit. All committee meetings were canceled as the world stopped for a while. We did expect to get called back to work after things settled down. And when we didn't hear anything by June, we sent an email asking about plans for our committee to meet again. We were told at that time that there were no plans for us to meet. Next, we heard in the media that council was going to discuss virtual meetings for committees, which our committee has been advocating for years. Our chair quickly put together a letter for the committee discussion saying that yes, we need to be meeting, but also please consider what needs to happen to make virtual meetings accessible to our committee members who may have additional barriers. That letter did not generate a single response from anyone at the city or on council. 2 more months passed, and we became aware that other city committees were all back at work. Some had missed a month or two. Some had gone to meeting every other month, but they were all back at work, and we couldn't even get our city to answer an email or a letter. As we came up on our 6th missed meeting, I tendered my resignation with a letter stating that I believe the city was in violation of the AODA by not allowing us to meet. But the other part of it was that if the city had not once considered asking for advice from ACAC in the past 6 months, when we were going through a pandemic that disproportionately affects people with disabilities, we were clearly not a committee that was seen as having value. I expected that my letter of resignation would raise some concerns and would give the city the nudge it needed to get ACAC back to work. Unfortunately, there was no response whatsoever. And after 6 more weeks passed, I contacted Megan Stacy and asked her to poke around City Hall and find out when advisory committees would meet, and particularly when ACAC would be allowed to meet. Following that newspaper article, the city's response was that ACAC would meet when they were legislatively required to do so. Michael's resignation followed, as he did not want to be seen as being complicit in the city's position that ACAC was not legally required to meet. In the meantime, I spoke with Arch Disability Law in Toronto, who advised that I file an AODA violation report on the city, which I have done. Unfortunately, they do not have an active means to enforce the AODA unless we choose to go through the Human Rights Code. They also advised me to contact the Ontario Ombudsman's Office, which I have done and have had several conversations. Following Michael's resignation, we were asked to go to a meeting last week with Kathy Saunders, Ms. Livingston, and Sean Lewis. A meeting has now been set for November 26th for Kathy and Ms. Livingston to meet with ACAC to discuss communication and procedure moving forward. There is no specific date yet for when ACAC can continue the regular meetings, and it looks likely that that won't happen until 2021. My reason for telling you all this is so that you are fully aware of what is going on with ACAC. We feel we were carelessly pushed to the side over the past 8 months. And while we understand that things have been anything but normal, city business has still been occurring and decisions have still been being made that should have gone through ACAC. My hope is that council will acknowledge their role in overseeing our committee and act to ensure that the voices of people with disabilities are being represented in the decisions that are being made by city and council. Thank you. Michael.
Sure, I'll response.
Okay.
As Jackie mentioned, I resigned because I didn't want to be complicit in what I agree with her being an AODA violation. I had also expected that there would be some response from her resignation, and certainly some response from the media attention that it garnered. When that didn't happen, I left after over 10 years of serving on the committee. We both come to this with an immense amount of personal passion. It's our children that we do this for. We're both lucky enough to have children who don't fit the mold, and as a result have opened up our worlds tremendously. And it's very disheartening to see that others don't see the value in trying to make sure that the world is open to people like my son or Jackie's son. We're not here to criticize. We're not here to complain. And I apologize if that's how it's coming across. What we are here for is to implore you, as we did 2 years ago, to take accessibility seriously, to make it a priority in this city, to make London the leader in accessibility that it once was. The province has admitted repeatedly ripping off London on accessibility documents, policies, etc. That hasn't been happening of recent. We can do this, and you as council and as the mayor have the power really to make this happen. So we're asking that you take it seriously, and hopefully moving forward, we can get back to a more accessible London for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now look for a mover and seconder to close the public participation part. No? What do we do? Sorry, this is not the usual public participation part. So I'll just go to committee for comments or questions, and Mrs. Madden and Mr. Dalworth can also answer those questions. So I'll go to committee for comments or questions. Are there any comments or questions from committee? I'll go to Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the efforts of our previous committee members. It's unfortunate that we have to part on not the best terms, but it is sad that our COVID situation has taken the focus away from many important things. Certainly this being one of them. I recall when we were first meeting about the COVID we had with various groups, accessibility was included. But since those have ended, I guess that that focus hasn't continued. So I'm sure that we'll be paying quite a bit more attention as the November meeting approaches. And again, my thanks to the many years and even decade of work that our guests have done for the City of London and for the people who have accessibility issues. Thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll echo what Councillor Van Hulst just said. I know that both of our guests today did resign from the committee, but that doesn't mean we're not very thankful for the many contributions that were made over the years that you were on the committee, and you spoke about a couple of them. But I wonder if I can ask a question through the chair of Councillor Lewis, who I see is on the call as well. It was mentioned that there was a meeting between the chair and some staff and our guests today. And I wonder if Councillor Lewis has any comments on how that meeting went and what came out of it.
I'll welcome Councillor Lewis to our committee. I'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Morgan, for the question on that. I'll start by saying thanks to both Jackie and to Michael for coming in and meeting with our city manager and our city clerk and myself. Obviously, I participated in that meeting as the chair of the committee that Accessibility Advisory Committee would normally report through, that being Community and Protective Services. I think the meeting was very productive. I think that there were some misunderstandings or misperceptions on both sides. For example, the fact that the resignation letter does not actually get circulated to council, so we were not aware of it. That's a clerk's process. We definitely heard some of the frustration from committee members about some COVID measures that were taken that weren't looked at through an accessibility lens. For example, we touched on the closure of the Richmond Row lane and allowing patios and lineups for businesses to move onto the sidewalks, but how that impacted people with accessibility challenges. Overall, I think it was very good because we established a process forward where there will be a next meeting at the end of November where we can clearly define some of the processes in what a committee restart might look like. And committee members are aware that it may not continue to look like business as usual for a while because we still are in a pandemic, and that some of the COVID decisions that have happened in the community are not actually decisions of council, but were either administratively delegated or resulting from the direction of the province. So that was part of the discussion as well. But really, I found it quite helpful to sit down with the committee members, and I hope that they found it helpful as well to establish a path forward for one of the committees that we're legislatively required to have. And And that was the important focus, is that like Latch, accessibility is legislatively required, although the AODA is a little more gray about what specific items the committee might address. In some areas, it's pretty clear in others. And so we have an opportunity to move forward and get this committee working again in November, and then looking forward to some progress happening in the new year for them to continue to do so.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for coming out and speaking to us. I want to, first of all, thank you for your service to our city. It is valued. It is important, and I have a great respect for not only this advisory group, but for all advisory groups. And I understand things aren't as business as usual, and it's been difficult these past number of months, but I'm glad you're here speaking to us today. I think it's important that we try to get back to normal, having these the advisory group meet. I'm glad to hear there is a meeting. I would like to know a little bit more about this meeting, though, through you, Madam Chair. I don't know who can answer this, but who's going to be at the meeting, and what's is the purpose of the meeting to get things going again? And I'm not sure who can answer that question.
We'll go to Mrs. Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a meeting of the advisory committee in whole. It is to talk about concerns raised and to try to communicate any misunderstandings that may have occurred. It is not a full meeting of the only thing on the agenda will be the discussions about the concerns raised and processes moving forward, how to better communicate and address the concerns that have been raised.
Thank you for that, and I'm really glad to hear that's going to be happening sooner than later. So thank you again for being here and speaking to us. It is really important that we hear the concerns and look forward to a better dialogue moving forward. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from committee? Councillor
Helmer. It should not be necessary for members of the committee to resign in order to draw attention to the fact that, you know, the committee is not able to provide advice. And I just want to apologize for, you know, my part in getting us to this point. I think council as a whole has got to take some responsibility for this particular problem. I can see from the communications back and forth where some of the weaknesses are, but ultimately, you know, if we think getting advice about accessibility issues is important, it's really up to us whether the advisory committees are meeting. And I think we need to take some responsibility for that. I know that Ms. Madden and Mr. Dowthorne and many other members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee really bring a great degree of expertise to the discussions. I think that's one of the great benefits of having the advisory committees. I mean, I think generally that they're very useful, but in certain areas I find them really, really helpful. Heritage, you know, you get a lot of really deep subject matter expertise, accessibility, EPAC, you know, the environmental stuff where we have people who are dedicating their PhDs or their doctoral research into those areas. We really benefit from a lot of subject matter expertise in those areas in particular. And the accessibility piece, I think during the pandemic, I know that it's the disruption from the pandemic that has caused part of the problem here, but it has been very difficult for a lot of people, but I think it has been especially difficult for people who have disabilities and are facing multiple challenges navigating the built environment in the first place. You know, we've had, back when we had the task forces meeting, we had a good discussion with a number of people from agencies and organizations. Ms. Madden participated in that, talking about some of the particular challenges. even just the simple example of installing plexiglass as a divider or wearing masks and how that is impacting people, let alone the more substantial impacts of rerouting pedestrian traffic, coming into sidewalks. There actually were a lot of changes happening where advice like that would be helpful. I know that many great things are happening at the staff level, despite the problem in having the advisory committee meeting. And I think overall, we are going in the right direction when it comes to many of these issues in terms of access and making the city as universally open as possible and as barrier-free as possible. But I think to do the absolute best, we do have to have a really well-functioning advisory committee, and we have to figure out how we can have meetings and get their input as we're making decisions, because the speed of decisions has kind of increased at the same time as the advisory committee input has kind of been tapering off. And I don't think that's a good combination. And as I think Councillor Van Holst said earlier, we're going to be in this situation for a while. And so we're going to have to figure out how to make it work really well. And I appreciate making the time to come and speak to a committee to talk to us directly about what's going on. I can tell it's coming from a good place. You want the committee to be well functioning. You want our policies and practices to be well informed with good advice. And that comes through in your communications, despite what I can imagine would be a very frustrating road to get to the point where you resign from the committee. So thanks very much for your service. I will, at least for myself, endeavor to do better when it comes to getting advice from the advisory committee and the accessibility one in particular.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I also just wanted to take the time to thank Mrs. Madden and Mr. Michael for being here to speak to committee, and also, take responsibility of the issues that have that were risen. And it's just like my colleague just said, it's something that we as council have to deal with and figure out a way to fix it and move forward and take the responsibility. There's shared responsibility here in what's transpired, and it is unfortunate for all the service that you've committed to our city that you have to depart this way, but we hope that you'll continue to support the group moving forward. I had an opportunity to chat with Mrs. Madden, and I think that she did mention that she wants to continue to support and to see this work continue to be better in our city and better representation for many people who are experiencing disabilities in our community. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. And we do take to heart your comments and your contributions and the work that you've done. And we take responsibility for what's transpired, and we hope to find a path forward and do better moving forward from here. So thank you for your time. And now I will look for someone to move and second closing this portion of our meeting. I need a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hopkins, and seconded by Councillor Morgan, and we will vote. Thank you, Mrs. Madden and Mr. Delworth.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. Now we have our deferred matter list. So we'll go to that. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Morgan. And any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call to question.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
We'll go to our additional businesses, and we have a motion from Councillor Morgan. Sorry, before we do that, we'll go to Mrs. Saunders for the report from the clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the added agenda, you'll find a staff report in response to a resolution passed by council last week with respect to potential costs related to returning to a first past the post election rather than a ranked ballot election. So I offer you that for your information.
Okay, I'll need a mover and a seconder to receive the report from the clerk. Moved by Councilor Morgan, seconded by Mayor Holder. Comments or questions? I'll go to Mr. Mayor Holder.
Thanks very much. Through the chair to the clerk, I follow the financial implication, and it looks like the costs associated with returning to first past the post is about $51,000. Does that include, clerk, any other commitments for contractual obligations beyond the first election cycle that were put in place at the time of the ranked ballot system?
I'll go to Mrs. Saunders.
Through you, Madam Chair, we would continue to be obligated with respect to our tabulators with Dominion. So it won't affect that. In fact, it would be a reduction because we would not need the rank vote charge, which is $12,000 as outlined in the report. But other than that, it would not impact that. But we will have additional costs as we have to replace all the materials that we created for the 2018 election.
So through you, Chair, and I appreciate this is inputs and outputs, and I followed through, Clerk, what you had put in place. Are you satisfied then that the $51,000 should give or take be the net cost associated with the returning to a first past the post? Not that that's a small amount of money, but are there any other pieces to this we need to be aware?
Mrs. Saunders?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is our best estimate based on what we know today.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Oh, sorry, could I add just one more if I could, through you, Chair, and that is, I'm not sure why I thought it might be a higher number, but having said it, as I explained to the Premier when we had a discussion beyond the letter I sent, any dollars associated with additional commitments to move back to first past the post, I'd rather see those kinds of dollars in COVID-related, with COVID-related challenges, not in a return to the first past the post system. I was clear on that. So the number, be it 51,000 or any other number, I think my point would remain the same. Thank you, Chair.
I'll go to first Councillor Hopkins, and then we'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I just would like to thank the Mayor for his letter as well. I think it was important that, obviously there was a conversation too with the Premier, which I think is really important. I would like to give the committee an update from my position on the AMO board as chair of the Large Urban Caucus. We did meet last week, and we did send a letter to the AMO executive meeting from last week, supporting AMO's concerns around the proposed changes to the Municipal Elections Act that are not supportive of local flexibility and determination. And the Large Urban Caucus was unanimous and when it came to opposing the decision to revoke local choice as envisioned in Bill 218. And we, as the City of London, obviously we went forward with ranked ballots, but the City of Kingston sits on the Large Urban Caucus And they did a referendum to have ranked ballots in the next election. And I know Burlington as well is looking at a ranked ballot. So there was really unanimous support, not so much for the ranked ballots, but really that local decision being taken away from municipalities. And we came out very strong and clear to AMO on our position. And I do know there is a policy committee happening, I think on Wednesday, and where there will be opportunities for people to speak at this committee. I'm just wondering through Madam Chair, is there someone from the City of London that will be appearing at that committee?
We'll go to Mrs. Livingston, if she's on the call with us.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I was having trouble unmuting. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will find out.
We'll go to Mrs. Saunders.
Through you, Madam Chair, there was no direction from council for staff to attend. I'm not sure from a council perspective if someone from council will be in attendance.
So, okay. Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Hopkins, and Councillor Hopkins, if you want to move a motion, you can do so now.
Well, I wasn't prepared to, not realizing that we needed a motion, but I do think given that we do rank ballots and it is something that we as a city have done, it would be important to be at that committee and would be happy to bring forward a motion that we have someone attend. I'll sort of put that on the floor. I don't have anything prepared, but welcome to the discussion here at committee.
So we have a motion on the floor right now with the report. So instead of just receiving it, we can also add an amendment that includes a direction to put a staff member to that meeting. And I'll go to Mrs. Saunders, then we'll go to Mr. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just caution from an administrative perspective, especially from the city clerk's perspective as the administrator of the election. We are neutral, so we would not have an opinion with respect to the ranked ballot. I have raised some concerns with some of the other changes, and the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers has submitted a letter expressing the clerks across Ontario concern, especially related to the change to nomination day. But from a ranked ballot perspective, we're neutral, so we would have not be able to speak to that specifically.
Is that the case for all staff members?
Not necessarily. I'm just stating that it would not be me that would be speaking to the ranked ballot.
Okay, so Councillor Hopkins, before we move on, are you still putting in the amendment on the floor, or is there a change of heart?
Well, you know, no one else has mentioned sort of, I'm open still to the conversation, but given staff's response of having to be neutral, I can understand that staff may not be inclined to attend this committee meeting. So I am glad to hear that they have sent out a letter, though, especially in regards to the nomination date, the concerns around that. I think it's really important that the provincial government is aware of the challenges that municipalities are experiencing.
Okay, so that means that your motion is still on the floor, or have you taken it off the floor?
I will take it off the floor.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Mayor Holder.
Very much, Chair. It is my intention to be speaking at that committee hearing and represent the perspective of council as we had discussed at our last meeting. So just to make colleagues aware that that's absolutely the plan. And there's been some communication, I know, with the, excuse me, the deputy mayor and with Councillor Morgan on this as well. So, so just to give committee members some information that might be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's a couple of counselors on our council that are going to be speaking at that. Perhaps Councillor Hopkins was wondering if there's a staff member that was going to be speaking at that, but I could be wrong, so I'll go back to Councillor Hopkins.
I'm just really glad that we as a city will be at that committee, and really I'm glad to hear that El Mayor and other colleagues may be attending as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, so we're back to receiving the report of the clerk. I'll go to Councillor Morgan first.
Thank you, and I wanted to move off of the mayor's comments, who talked about the $51,000 cost of switching back. I would also remind colleagues that when we switched to ranked ballots, we invested, and I would call them investments right up until we're forced to change back, a number of one-time costs that are articulated in the report to move to the new system, which essentially become sunk costs if we have to move back to first past the post. However, if we're able to continue with ranked ballots, we're not required to incur a number of those costs moving forward into the future because they've been incurred and they were associated with the first time we had to do ranked ballots. So I think that's also an important consideration, that there's a loss of investment here if we're forced to move back to first past the post. That shouldn't be discounted as well. And I know that the mayor has been good about articulating that piece as well. I just wanted to note it for the committee's reference and anyone tuning in.
Thank you. So it's been moved. The clerk's report has been moved and seconded. So we'll call to question.
I vote yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 6-0.
Thank you. Now we're on to our additional businesses, and we'll go to the motion. We'll go to Councillor Morgan to introduce the motion that was shared around today for Provincial Business Support Fund for businesses, and it has been. I'll be the seconder on our committee, but it's also supported by Steve Lehman, Councillor Steve Lehman. We'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. And I apologize for circulating this morning. One of the disadvantages of our committee being on a Monday is the deadline for the added agenda is very early on Friday. And frankly, I've been having conversations through the weekend with impacted businesses. So I think given others would not have seen the communication, I'd like to read it so that everyone is aware. It says, to the Chair and members of Corporate Services Committee, Provincial Business Support Funds. Earlier this month, the Premier announced a special $300 million fund to support businesses in areas that moved into a modified stage 2. The fund was established to assist them in mitigating revenue losses by supporting some fixed cost expenses like property taxes and utilities. In his remarks, the Premier indicated that, quote, "We will spare no expense to help business owners get through this," unquote. The financial support efforts rightly attempt to offset the economic impacts of important public health measures. Recently, the London Middlesex Medical Officer of Health issued new Section 22 orders that impact London businesses. The impacts of these orders are not insignificant and will put a number of London small businesses into difficult financial positions. Given the importance of stabilizing economic conditions when public health orders are issued, we would ask Municipal Council support the following motion: that the following actions be taken to assist London businesses in mitigating financial losses as a result of provincial health regulations put in place with respect to COVID-19. A, the province of Ontario be advised that the City of London supports the measures being put in place to assist local economies and businesses in offsetting the financial impacts resulting from the implementation of public health measures. And B, the Mayor be requested to engage with the Premier and Minister of Finance to request that London businesses impacted by Section 22 orders under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, RSO 1990, be provided with access to the funding, funding provided for the new $300 million business support fund. and it's signed by myself, Councillor Lehman, and Councillor Kaibaga. And so I know Councillor Kaibaga said she was willing to second it. I'd be happy to proceed with some of my thoughts and discussions I had with businesses that would support us moving in this direction, if the chair would like me to do that now.
So we'll just go to committee since it's been moved and seconded to see if there are any comments or questions. I see that Councillor Lehman wants to make some comments. Before I call upon Councillor Lehman, I just want to see if committee wanted to have any questions or has comments. I'll go to Mayor Holder, and then I'll go to Councillor Van Hulst, and then we'll go to Councillor Lehman.
Thanks very much, Chair. I appreciate the spirit of this, and I will certainly support this going forward. I have some thoughts that it will likely not be particularly well received insofar as the jurisdiction of deciding to go into different stages, such as the modified stage 2, which are in 4 regions of the province, are the purview of the province, not a local medical officer of health. I mean, clearly I don't know. And as my Cape Breton mom would ever say, it never hurts to ask. And we'll see where this goes. I'm really not certain, but I will be vigorous in my support of it. As they say, hope for the best and the rest pay cash. And let's hope they consider paying cash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go to Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for bringing this forward as well. From a number of emails we've received, I'm getting the impression that some of the Section 22 orders are moving businesses into a situation of no longer being viable. So certainly they need assistance because of that. And if that opens the door for them, that's great. I wonder if this request implies that other businesses won't be eligible for that. So there's a question for the mover when Councillor Morgan begins to speak about it. So that's my comment. Thanks. And I hope that we do get assistance for some of these businesses that are being very strongly impacted by the orders that have been made.
Thank you, Councillor Van Hulst. I think Councillor Morgan will be able to answer some of those questions just shortly. I will go to Councillor Lehman, and then I'll go to Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Lewis after, and then Councillor Cassidy as well.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak to the committee. Before I speak to this motion, I want to clarify Section 22 gives direction to restaurants and bars, indoor sports, recreational facilities, fitness facilities, and personal service settings. The motion before you refers explicitly to Section 22. As my business is not one of those identified in Section 22, I do not have a conflict. Since the start of this pandemic, all levels of government have acted in the best interests of the health and well-being of its citizens. But as we have seen, governments have had to be flexible as they gain new knowledge of the virus and the impact of the consequences of their actions. They recognized early on that the economic impacts of health orders could be just as devastating as the virus itself, as they've given unprecedented financial assistance to all levels of business to keep the economy going so people have jobs during and after the pandemic. As this motion refers to, the provincial government recently introduced a plan for $300 million in assistance to businesses affected by their new restrictions. This motion is asking the province to recognize that restrictions brought on locally by our health unit can be equally as harmful as those resulting from the provincial restrictions. The Premier said, referring to the provincial restrictions, I know what this will do to businesses who are already struggling. I've been fighting for you since day one, and I'll continue to fight for you. I'll do everything in my power to support you and will never forget the sacrifices you've made. In order to be consistent with the province's well-placed concern, the province needs to allow access to this funding by our local businesses that have specifically been impacted by the health unit's recent directives in providing safety and security for all of Londoners. Many of the businesses impacted by Section 22 are small businesses who have struggled for 7 months to keep the lights on. I have heard from many of these small businesses and their customers in my ward, as I know all of you have. They are frustrated and scared. Just as customers start to return, giving a glimmer of hope, new restrictions start closing the door. As a city, we have limitations in what we can do. What we can do is advocate on behalf of our small businesses and bring to the attention of the provincial government the effects seen at the local level by local health directives. So our restaurants, fitness facilities, personal service shops, indoor sports and recreational facilities can continue to provide needed services and continue to welcome Londoners who are supporting our local economy, ensuring London will land on its feet as we win this fight on COVID. I wish to thank all committee members for your consideration of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I'll go to Councillor Hopkins, and then I'll go to Councillor Lewis has put his hand down. I'm not sure if he still wants to speak, but we'll go to Councillor Hopkins for now.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lehman, for that. I hear the concerns loud and clear from your statement, and I know each and every one of us has heard from the business community regarding the Section 22 that came down a couple weeks ago, and the concerns that are in the community. And for us not to do anything, it's almost a crime. It is a real challenge when we hear from businesses that are vulnerable and are unable even to start up again. The ones that have been able to start up again through Section 22 is being most likely challenging enough, but there are a number of businesses that haven't even reopened. So the concern is great. It is something that we need to do regardless where this will go. I definitely would encourage the mayor to do what he can when it comes to the challenges that this Section 22 has created in our community. I do have a couple questions though. And I guess the first question is, as it relates to B, how that engagement looks like is something I'd like to know a little bit more about. But what I also have concerns about is how we will report back to the community, because there is a lot of confusion out there, even with this Section 22. And as we, try to support businesses, how do we go back to these businesses and say, well, this is what happened over here. We were unable to do this. And I'm just wondering how this communication is going to work, because I think that is really important. The question about engagement, how that is going to work, and then also the reporting part. If I'll go to my colleagues who brought this motion forward to answer that, if they've even given that a bit of thought. But I do think this is a huge problem in our community, and the more we can do to communicate, it's just not saying we're going to do that, but also reporting back as the results of how that engagement looked like. So not sure who can answer that, but I'll go to my colleagues who brought forward the motion.
So Councillor Hopkins, if it's okay with you, I just wanted to let people ask their questions and make their comments, and then we'll go back to Councillor Morgan. And he'll be able to respond to those questions. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Thank you. So I'll go to Councillor Lewis right now, and if there are no other questions or comments from committee, we'll go to Councillor Morgan.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me, and thanks to you and Deputy Mayor-elect Morgan and Councillor Lehman for bringing this motion forward. This is an excellent motion to me. For the first time since the pandemic began, a couple of weeks ago, London deviated from consistency with the rest of the province because our medical officer of health issued Section 22 orders that weren't being matched by provincial restrictions that were put in place in other areas that had to step back to modified stage 2. that's made us ineligible, our businesses ineligible to access that $300 million fund. And I think that if the province is going to continue, and I sense that they will continue to allow local medical officers of health to make changes locally as they see fit under Section 22, then I think that it's really important that access to this fund is based on restrictions that are in place in communities, not based on whether the restrictions have been imposed by the province or by the local medical officer of health. So I think that this is a really, really key motion. I want to thank all three of you for putting it together. I'm sure that there will be, if there's some positive results from the province, I'm sure we'll be able to share this with our local recovery tables as well, and find ways to connect businesses in that manner in terms of how they can perhaps access some of these funds. So I know it's still a lot of work to do before we're there. And I know that the mayor will continue to represent us in some talks with the premier and his staff, and hopefully we can get somewhere on this. So just want to say this will have my full support when it comes to council, and I think the three of you have brought forward a really, really important motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I'll go to Councillor Cassidy, who is on the line with us, but is not able to be on the screen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm on the phone today. So I just want to also add my thanks to yourself and to Councillors Morgan and Councillor Lehman for bringing this motion forward. I think it's a very good one. I understand that technically we are not modified stage 2. We're not in that same boat, but I do want to point out some remarks that the Premier made not too long ago, and very specific to London to Middlesex London after our medical officer of health issued the Section 22 order. The Premier, in his press conference, expressed gratitude for the approach of Middlesex London. And the Premier, I think you'll all recall, the provincial approach has always been regional rather than in rare instances, but as the reopening began, the approach has been regional. So rather than issue blanket orders across the province, even for regions where they have 0 or few cases, he preferred the regional approach. And so his remarks in his press conference a few days ago were gratitude to Middlesex London for taking the approach that they have, for issuing the order on a local in our region, and not, in his words, expecting the province to step in and do it for us. So our region is acting, and our medical officer of health and his team at the health unit, they are acting based on what's happening locally and also based on what they are seeing happening in other regions to prevent that from happening here. So, so you have the Premier's gratitude, and perhaps that gratitude may make him more receptive to looking at this request that we're making. So I'm hopeful there. I also want to make sure that everybody understands in the public. I know the council understands, but based on the emails that we are getting, the medical officer of health is an independent and autonomous figure, and it's a role that is legislated under the Health Protection and Promotion Act. City Council does not direct the medical officer of health, which is a good thing because it reduces that chance that decisions like this will be made on a political basis rather than a scientific basis. And so I too am very worried, and I empathize greatly with these small businesses that are facing these struggles. These are challenging times that none of us could have ever foreseen when we were running for election or re-election in 2018. This is a unique situation, and I believe that Middlesex London has approached it in a very strong way and has resisted the urge to issue orders when people wanted orders that had no basis in science, and the medical officer of health actually, issued a little bit of a different order initially in this latest round, and then stepped back after hearing from stakeholders, after hearing from fitness facilities and local sports groups and things like that, and modified the order slightly, as well as for personal support services, modified the order slightly. So the team at the Middlesex London Health Unit really is taking this local approach, looking at what is happening here. And what's happening here is the same as what's happening around the world. Our numbers are going up. And in order to prevent the numbers from going up more drastically and more quickly and overwhelming our hospital system and our ICUs, these steps need to be taken. And I know that the team at Middlesex London Health Unit do not take this lightly. They are concerned, and they're trying to do what they can with as little impact as possible on local businesses and local families. So I just want to make those comments and say that I know that the Premier has appreciated the approach that we've taken here locally, and I'm hopeful that he will have an open ear when he listens to our mayor. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. I'll go to Mayor Holder. Sorry, Councillor Morgan, you're just gonna have to wait for one more person. Mayor Holder.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Councillor Cassidy about the independence of the medical officer of health. By the way, that could well be a two-edged sword, because from the standpoint of any medical officer of health's ability to call out certain restrictions via a section that's has been designated. I've had some councillors have had extensive discussions with the medical officer of health, because we are not Toronto, York, Ottawa, Peel, and look, our hearts go to those individuals there. Today we had one case, and one day doesn't make a situation, because we also had one death today, and our hearts go to that family. But our numbers are significantly lower than any than almost any community in the province of any size, and I think that's a testament to the approach that we've taken. I will remind colleagues that I think it would be great if this passed. I think this motion makes great optics, and at the same time, I think it's the right thing to do. So I think to support it is one thing, but I don't think that when a medical officer of health uses his independence to put certain restrictions, and I think he's been very moderate, I would suggest to you, in his restrictions on how business is being conducted, that that necessarily translates into financial support from the province when it creates a variety of challenges in a number of municipalities. So with that, I look forward to the decision of colleagues, council, and we'll proceed accordingly. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. A couple of things. One, I'll support the motion. I think it's reasonable. I'm not sure what the chances are of success, but worth a shot. Second thing I want to say is, these restrictions, they come in because the disease is spreading in the community in an uncontrolled way, where you got a lot of community spread and you can't link it back to other cases, and you look at high risk activities, and that's where restrictions start. And I think it's a good thing that we're looking at more targeted interventions rather than really widespread impacts. I think that's only when the disease is really out of control and is spreading very rapidly in the community are those kind of measures necessary. And we saw what the kind of impact of the kind of total shutdown, what kind of impact that can have. Hopefully these interventions, public health measures, will prevent us from getting to the point where we do have to go into modified stage 2. And I'm hopeful that will be the case. I think it's a bit early to tell yet. But it's not the public health measures themselves that really affect how fast the disease is spreading and how many cases there are. It's our behavior as people in the community. And we don't need restrictions to tell us, limit your contacts with other people. Don't go and see a bunch of other people. Don't get close to other people. If you do have to go out, wear a mask when you're going to get close to someone. Stick within your sort of household unit as much as you possibly can, and really minimize the amount of time that you're interacting with other people. If we all do that, we individually do those things, and we really just prioritize the things that we absolutely have to do and cut back on all those other contacts, things we'd like to do, but we can't really do. Things that are really important to us, they're going to be different for different people, what those important things are. That's how we'll get the disease under control in the community. I think that's why we have been successful in many ways in London already, is because people have been taking it very seriously, and they've been really choosing the things that they really have to do. And I think we're still in that situation. Across the province, the pandemic is worse now than it was at the beginning in terms of the number of cases. And we had almost 1,000 people yesterday in new cases. So London, I think, is doing pretty well. We need to really stick with the public health measures and really just focus on doing the things that are absolutely essential, and cut back on some of the stuff. So, supporting our local businesses like a restaurant, wonderful. Order takeout, get it delivered to your house if you can. Don't get together with 5 or 6 friends, all from different households. And, that's not the appropriate thing to be doing right now. So I think asking the province to include London, I think, is reasonable. I will say the even more impactful thing the province could do would be to fix the unfair taxation of business properties in the province of Ontario. And hopefully they'll do that, because that certainly would help a lot of London businesses with their property taxes. And I'm optimistic that they'll hear us on that issue, which we've already raised with them. But I'll support the motion. I think it's coming from a good place. I want to commend the 3 councillors for bringing it forward. I think we have to recognize that there are impacts of these restrictions, which are necessary. But if we can do something to offset it, if they can include London in the provincial program, I think all the better.
Thank you. We'll go to, okay, it looks like Councillor Van Hulst has an extra comment or question. Councillor Van Hulst?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm just want to have a question through you, perhaps to our staff. Right now, our city is enforcing the mask bylaw. Do we also enforce any of the other or the new Section 22 orders from the health unit?
We'll go to Mrs. Livingston.
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding is we do not participate in the enforcement of the Section 22 orders.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. So we'll now go to Councillor Morgan. I'm sure he took some notes from the questions and comments from our committee, and he can address some of those.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll try to do my best. If I missed something, I apologize. First off, I did want to make the general comment. I think this has been a very excellent discussion that we're having, because we have stayed out of talking about the validity or importance of public health orders. That is not in our jurisdiction at all. And I think Councillor Cassidy did a very good job of articulating that the medical officer of health has complete authority under the Act to issue these things when they're warranted, and that's what he has done. And so what we can do, though, is we can listen and look for the impacts as they occur within our city, and in this case, on our local small businesses, and they range in magnitude. The fund is something that the province created to try to help, because they recognize that public health measures do have economic impacts, and they want to try to support those businesses that would be impacted by public health measures. I fully agree that the magnitude of those impacts vary across regions, and Section 22 orders that are targeted in surgical do not require broad-based supports for all businesses. They require something a little more targeted and surgical. And so when Councillor Hopkins asked how will B work, B is a little bit open and flexible to give the mayor the opportunity to engage with the premier and the minister on this, because it likely involves a discussion. The province is working with a flexible attitude as they move into stage 2 and out of stage 2 in areas. They add different areas into accessing the fund. And what they've set up is a support mechanism that generally is meant to help businesses impacted by it. So that's where I think the overlay is for London. And the only difference here is that our medical officer of health has made some targeted orders, and we have businesses that are impacted. So I think it's a discussion, Councillor Hopkins. I think the mayor can engage in that discussion and take it where it needs to go. As for the reporting back, it will depend on what the answer is, but I think, you know, we've got a number of networks at our disposal. Certainly, you know, the health unit is in constant contact with impacted businesses. We have the recovery tables. We also have the Chamber of Commerce and other mechanisms to get the word out on any sort of results. And of course, if the province opens this up, there will be an application system or whatever mechanism they determine, which they are still modifying and working on in the different impacted areas. So we're jumping in on this in a way where we're illuminating a need in our city because of some orders that have been issued. As for how this is all going to work, I actually think that is still in flux and at play. And so if there is a reasonable discussion to have with the province, which I think there is, we have to see where that goes. But what I don't think we can do is not make the ask, as the mayor said. If we don't make the ask, we don't get anything. If we don't draw attention to the impacts of local businesses, then you know, the premier and the province are not aware of them. So so I appreciate all of the support for the motion. I agree, it is a big ask to make, but I think it's an important ask to make and to have the province consider. Because I can tell you, I made a social media post on this after the orders were issued, and I had 100 engagements with local businesses that day. And since then, I've been on the phone for the past week with many of them, talking about how this is impacting their business. And they've done a good job of reaching out to Dr. Mackey and his team to get clarification on how it would impact their businesses. But there are certainly impacts. There are certainly impacts that make some significant challenges for a number of sectors that are impacted. So I don't know if I answered all the questions there. I kind of jotted them down, but I'd be happy to engage with others. And otherwise, I'm pleased to hear that the committee is supportive of this direction, and we'll have to see where it goes.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I'll go back to Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Morgan, for answering my questions. I really do appreciate it. And I know not to do anything would be totally wrong, given the concerns that we hear in our community. As a member of the London Community Recovery Network as well, it would be great to have the information coming back to that table as we go through this process. I am very much about you know, communicating, passing information. To say we're going to do this is one thing, but how we communicate with our community is something that's very, very important to me. I want to thank the three of you for bringing this forward and very supportive. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Morgan, seconded by myself, and we'll call to question.
Chair, I will yes.
Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 6-0.
Thank you. So now we will go to our confidential session of our meeting, and we're going into confidential section for items 6.1 to 6.3. And I will need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Helmer, and we will vote on that.
I'll vote yes, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins. Oh, thank you. Closing the vote.
Motion's carried 6-0.
We'll just wait till the right people are in the room.